Well, well, one thing, I went to work because a lot of people had gone into service, of course, and there were jobs around, and I went to work in a toy factory. They made little desks, blackboard desks for children, and they dipped half moons as braces in shellac. And the man next to me was called the Big Dipper, and I was called the Little Dipper. So I had that job, dipping half moons into shellac and work. Sometimes I worked at Sears and Roebuck, but I usually had jobs. To answer your question, Pearl Harbor, we sat around as a family and watched the bombing of Pearl Harbor. I think that, well, there was fear every place because Pearl Harbor was so close to our country. And the devastation was more than we ever realized could happen. I thought so much of my brother, and I watched him as he watched the bombing. And I was concerned with what I saw in his face, because I knew what he was going to do.
What do you see on his face?
That he was going to enlist
right
away, and he went in the morning following. He went down and enlisted in the Marine Corps. Well, it made me feel I was frightened of what was going to happen to him. Because we saw the bombing of Pearl Harbor was pretty realistic, and the doctors that were on some of those ships would tell you that it was a pretty horrific situation. So I was concerned about what he would go through. I think everyone was pretty united because they thought that this was such a devastating attack on us. There was no, warning that this was going to happen. And that was the reason why they started shipping Japanese off into the center of the country. Because they were afraid of what they might do. Well, the Marine Corps, as you've probably heard, is a very special outfit. I mean, there's a kind of wonderful I don't know what we call it wonderful, but there's a certain kind of philosophy that goes with being a Marine. And so and the training is quite essential to them, because they were going to start going into the islands. The United States was going to have to bomb. They needed airspace, you see, in order to start bombing Japan. And it was necessary for them to, our country, to supply those islands that we own, of course, so that prepare them for airplanes that could land on those islands. And Japanese were very much concerned with that. But when my brother was on one of those islands, he lost his legs, and he then came home on a ship. All the military ships usually landed in San Francisco, and so for sunrise. He didn't get a Purple Heart, but he protected and gave faith and hope to another Marine that had made a mistake in how he'd used a grenade. And so his company, he didn't get a Purple Heart, as I said. So his company got together and gave him a silver watch that said to a damn good Marine. That's the best thing you could say to a Marine. It's a damn good Marine. Soldier in Germany. So we went to Germany, and then they took us through Dachau concentration camp, and that was very revealing, very hard to stomach. But then I went, of course, loved Paris because I saw all the original work of artists that I'd studied all my life, and I had a couple of friends who were still studying in Paris. Well, there is interesting aspects to it. One of the girls in our group had parents in England that went through the bombing of England, and so we were showed some of the areas where they had to stay when the bombing was going on, and we heard about what it was like.
What was it like?
Well, it was frightening. They didn't know when they were going to hit, and they were very courageous because they didn't know how bad it was going to get with the Germans. You know, because that onslaught of Germany was much more than they ever anticipated, and so, well, I guess the best way you could view, there was a considerable amount of fear for the English when the Germans started bombing. It depends. Now, when the girl I mentioned who had her brother was in the service in Europe, in Germany, they took us through Dachau, and the interesting thing that Dachau, they said there that they didn't know what the Germans were doing. Well, they had
After the war.
they had racks, wooden racks, 2x4s, and they had the prisoner, they used it for target practice. They had the prisoners stand on those racks and used them for target practice. They showed us the gas chambers, and there were hands and scratches from fingernails and all this kind of thing on the walls of the gas chambers. And they showed us of course they had the place where we burned the bodies, and they showed us those. And they slept on wooden boards. They'd be lucky if they had one blanket. The boards were about this wide, and they were up high, built up high, and they weren't fed well at all. I had read a story about a young German boy that felt so thrilled one day because he got a sandwich. An old woman gave him a sandwich, and they starved him as well as they could. And when the Americans were starting to come in, it's toward the end of the war, they took big rolls of not wood, but scraps of wood, and put them along where they kept the prisoners and set them on fire, so that they died from, a couple of older women that suffered considerably because they were old, and they had to, as I had said, they had to sleep on this, just on boards, and I heard them talk, not too long ago. As a matter of fact, they came back and described what their life had been like, and they said the worst thing that they could do to them was stay alive. And that's what they concentrated on, was staying alive, just to, show them. Well, in my case, changed a lot about what I thought about things, because I spent a lot of time, anytime you spend some time in a military hospital, you kind of think about the things that really matter, and and you have a great concern for what these people have been, experienced. Yeah. He suffered a lot. I think one time he tried to commit suicide, but it didn't work for him. He didn't do it right. And I really gave him a bad time when he tried to do that. I said you told him that what he was inside didn't have anything to do with what was on the outside. And so anyway, so he felt very fortunate, because he saw a lot of all those Marines got off of those boats first, on those islands, on those Pacific islands, and he, when you reach that point, you just feel like you're alive. I mean, he saw a lot of these guys go down, and so that's why he always talked, was that he felt fortunate, and I'm sure all those soldiers and Marines and the guys and the pilots, everybody, if they lived through it, they felt fortunate to have their lives.